Thank you very much for your interesting view and your experience. I'm sure there will be some questions later. They will be answered in the end of the session at the Q&A session. Everyone can write your questions in the chat box, and they will be answered at the end, or you can keep it at the end and then raise hand. And when you are call out, you can ask directly. And so now we are moving to the keynote speaker, who is the Dr. Bianca Eskelson, Associate Professor in Forest Biometrics at the University of British Columbia in Canada. And so, Doctor, what do graduate advisors look for in the applicants?
Thank you, Joshua, first of all, for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here and a great honor to be asked to talk about this topic. And thank you, Simon, for the introduction. I would like to start, let me see how to advance the slides. I would like to start with the disclaimer. I can really only talk about what I look for in applicants for grad students and postdocs because I didn't do a survey or anything on other advisors. However, I have the assumption that other Forest Biometrics advisors will probably look for some of the same things, maybe not all of the same things, but some of the same things. So I just keep that in mind. The title of the talk is very broad, and I don't think I can really speak to everybody and what everybody looks for, but in the following, I structured the presentation. I'll give you a short background on who I am and how I ended up in Canada teaching at the University of British Columbia. I will very briefly talk about what Forest Biometrics is, because a lot of you probably listened to Shengyi's talk yesterday. And then I'm going over 3 sets of skills that I identified that I look for when I interview potential grad students and postdocs. And I'll talk a little bit about technical skills. I'll talk about, in quotes, soft skills. Folks refer to them as soft skills. I actually think they're very important. And the term soft sort of minimizes their importance. And I'll talk a little bit about personality traits of forest biometricians that I look for. And then I have a brief summary of that. So I grew up in Germany in Central Europe, and I spent a lot of time as a kid in beech forests and oak forests there, but I also, due to family connections, spent a lot of time in pine forests of Scandinavia, as well as spruce forests in the Austrian Alps. And because of my love of forests, I ended up going to the University of Göttingen, where I received a bachelor's degree in forest sciences and forest ecology. And then I moved on to get a master's degree. At the time, it was called Forest Ecosystem Analysis and Information Processing, but it's really a master's degree in forest biometrics. And then after that, I had the great opportunity to move to Oregon State University in Oregon on the west coast of the United States, where I started a PhD program under the supervision of Temesgen. And as part of that PhD program, I also enrolled in a Master's of Statistics, which was really beneficial and great that I had the opportunity to do that. Because of personal reasons, I stuck around Corvallis, Oregon for a while, several years after my PhD, and stayed working with Temesgen as a postdoc and research associate. And then in 2004, I had the opportunity to apply. I applied in 2013, I guess, but in 2014, we moved to Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada, and I started working at the University of British Columbia as assistant professor in forest biometrics, where I've been since 2014, and I am an associate professor there since 2020. Yeah, and I wanted to talk a little bit about what did I struggle with when I moved to the United States to get my PhD in forest biometrics there. So I guess the biggest struggle was the culture shock of moving to the United States. Everybody was very friendly, and I was super lucky and had the best supervisor there is, but I was quite homesick, and I did struggle with the North American university system. So in Germany, we typically had just final exams, And in the US and in Canada, you've got quizzes and midterms and final exams. And I really struggled with the pace of constant tests that I had to take. So I struggled, I would say, at the beginning. And then I enrolled in the statistics courses, and I really needed calculus and linear algebra background. And I had taken calculus and linear algebra in high school. And so it had been 4 or 5 years since I had used these math skills, and I needed to go back and study to be able to follow my statistics courses. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go. And of course, I needed to improve my English. So what is Forest Biometrics? In light of Shengi talking about this in detail yesterday, I decided not to spend a lot of time on it, and I Googled around for definitions. And since I am in British Columbia, the province of British Columbia, the ministry on one of their pages has this listed. So they state forest biometrics is the use of statistical methods for issues relevant to forestry and forest ecology. Forest biometrics informs policy decisions such as ranking habitat for species at risk, modeling future climate change scenarios, and studying the economics of forests impacted by disturbance. And I like this definition because it highlights the importance of forest biometrics, because it does impact summarizing what we have in terms of natural resources and modeling what we have in the future and where is very crucial for a lot of policy decisions and for management decisions. And I think this highlights the importance of forest biometrics in anything we do in forest management. Okay, moving into my part of what I'm looking for when I recruit grad students, master's students, PhD students, or also postdocs or research associates. So as listed in my introduction overview slide, I will start talking about some of the technical skills. So I do look for math skills, and so the skills that I struggled with when I first came to the US and started my master's in statistics there and my PhD in forest biometrics, I really needed to go back and review differential and integral calculus and multivariate calculus, multivariate calculus. And what I did for that is, since I didn't bring anything from Germany in terms of books, I just went to the OSU bookstore and I looked at what was used in terms of books for the calculus classes taught at OSU, and I bought some used textbooks, and I sat down in the evenings and I worked through the calculus textbooks to review the material on my own. And then linear algebra, I had quite a lot of linear algebra in high school. I just needed, again, sort of a reminder of what things were about. And so same thing, I got a used textbook and worked through bits of that textbook as needed. And so looking for when I recruit grad students, do they have to have these skill sets right then and there? They need to have the basic math skills to be able to do differential and integral calculus and linear algebra. And oftentimes you can teach yourself, I think. You just need to have the willingness to catch up on those skill sets. So having said that, if you don't have these math skills through your current schooling, I don't think that means you can not apply or enroll into graduate level forest biometrics programs. It just means that this is something you probably have to be willing to invest into. Similarly, I often get asked, so how much statistics do I already need to know when you move into forest biometrics? And I sort of listed this separately in terms of, are you starting a master's program or starting a PhD program? So for master's students, you really don't necessarily need to come with that many prerequisites and statistics. It would be very good to have had at least one introduction to statistics course. And Joshua talked a little bit about that, learning about the median and the mode, and learning about measures of central tendency and measures of variability, and knowing how to do t-tests and hypothesis tests in general, those things would be good if you have that applying for a master's degree. And then as you do your master's degree, you would take more advanced applied statistics courses on linear models and also on more advanced models, such as linear models with mixed effects or generalized linear models, etc. And I listed this as when you do start a PhD, when I look at potential PhD students, I do look for students who have taken these kinds of courses as part of their master's degree. And then what I think is really important is to work on mathematical statistics and probability theory. And I would say it's a plus if you have some background in that when you start your PhD program in Forest Biometrics. I took a lot of coursework as a PhD student in mathematical statistics and probability theory, and I do it again. It was hard, and I worked very hard for these courses, but they have opened doors for me moving forward. So having said that, I don't think you necessarily need to come with these skill sets, but you do need to be willing to work to acquire these skill sets. And you should enjoy them to some degree, I guess. Otherwise, it's pretty tough to acquire these skill sets and work for them. Yeah, so that was math and statistics skills. And then there's sort of, programming skills. Folks ask, oh, what do I need to know? And what programming language should I learn? And I think when you start a master's degree in Forest Biometrics, it's a plus if you have a basic understanding of programming principles. So if you know what conditional statements are and what loops are, that for PhD students to start is, I think, the bare minimum PhD students should have, be somewhat proficient in some coding language. So again, different sort of skill sets I'm looking for master's students or PhD students. I think it is very important that you have programming skills as you move forward in your career, and that is something master's students definitely should invest into as they take courses or on the side on their own. And as a PhD student in Forest Biometrics, I think it's extremely important that you have programming skills and that you invest into them to improve them. And then what programming language should you learn? I don't think it really matters. You just need to understand programming concepts. And if you know one language, you can easily transfer to a different language. I think also as we move through our careers after being a student, you will inevitably have to learn different programming languages because everything changes and there are newer, different programming languages and things change, and you simply need to adapt. So don't think that it's ever a waste to invest into one programming language and then saying, oh, but maybe this was not the right one, or I don't need this one. Yeah, it'll inevitably happen. You learn a programming language and then you end up using something else. So just invest into learning the concepts. And if you can program in one language, you can transfer that into other languages. Okay, so those are sort of my first three technical skills sets that I'm looking for: math, statistics, programming. But I'm also looking in Forest Biometrics as you model how trees grow, how stands grow, and project things forward. And you try to model and understand and analyze what impacts tree growth. You do need to have some basic tree biology knowledge and ecosystem knowledge. So have you learned how trees grow? Have you, right? Do you know how forest ecosystems function? So right, if you take my first skill sets of math, statistics, programming, I'm not really looking for computer programmers. I'm looking for folks who have forestry knowledge and know about trees, right? You can't do forest biometrics without that knowledge. And you need to be able to converse with foresters and know how we measure trees in the field, what sort of the standard variables are that we measure. You need to, not necessarily when you come in as a master's student, but then as a PhD student, I would probably expect that you have knowledge about fixed radius plot and variable radius plot sampling and line intersect sampling, so that you do have some sampling theory knowledge that you acquired in some courses, and that you know how to compile tree plot and stand level data as you measure that. So those are some basics, and that you know what basal area per hectare is, and what stem per hectares are, and what different relative density metrics are out there, etc. And did I have that as a PhD student? Some of it, maybe, but when I did move to Oregon State University, and my supervisor, Temesgen, taught the forest measurements course, the undergrad forest measurements course, and I was a TA for that course for many years. I did attend his lectures of his undergraduate course, and I worked through the Avery and Burkhardt, now Burkhardt et al. Book, as I said in his course, and to work through that, and TA'd the course for several years as a PhD student, and then as a postdoc had the opportunity to teach that course, which was a lot of fun. And so again, there's the, if you don't have the knowledge of these things, there's great textbooks, right? The Burkhardt et al. Book and also the Kershaw et al. Book, that are the two standard textbooks that are being used in North America, I think. So you can work through those books and acquire these skill sets. And then some knowledge about basic silviculture concepts, I think, is important and helpful, because in forest biometrics and forest modeling, we do often look at impacts on tree growth and impacts of different silviculture procedures. And so it's good to have some background in silviculture. Yeah, and then Joshua mentioned the book by Harold Burkhardt and Margarita Tomei on modeling. And similarly, I don't necessarily think a master's student needs to bring these skill sets, but a PhD student should have heard about tree and stand level models and know what they are, and know what model components do go into tree level models, what type of growth equations, mortality equations, recruitment equations go in there. And there are great textbooks like the book from Harold Burkhardt and Margarita Tomei, the book by Aaron Weiskittel et al., and of course also the book Joshua mentioned by Lauri Metetalo and Juha Lappi, with a lot of great forestry examples for modeling. Okay. And then the last one, GIS and remote sensing. So I do work with remote sensing data. I obviously also have to create maps, etc. To me, these are technical skills that are a great plus when I recruit folks. I think they are very essential. I also think that you can probably teach yourself. There are lots of online resources. So they become more and more important. It's definitely something to invest into. I highly suggest to my students and postdocs to find resources and teach themselves, but they don't necessarily, I don't necessarily send them to take courses unless it fits into their schedule. So I prioritize applied stats courses and stats theory courses in the stats department over GIS and remote sensing courses. I consider these skill sets something you just need. They're just tools, like programming, right? I don't necessarily send my students off to take programming courses. You just sort of need to develop these skill sets. And so, yeah, programming, GIS, and remote sensing skill sets I think you just sort of need. And you need to be able to teach yourself what you need as you move forward in those areas. Okay, moving on to in quotes soft skills. By calling them soft skills, I just go with sort of what other people call them when you look on the internet. I actually think they're very important skills. And first of all, oral communication. So you need to be able to communicate orally. Talking about statistics results, you need to use, I think, precise language so that there's no confusion. And therefore, I can only highlight the importance of investing into your English if you do want to move to North America, Canada, or the United States, or English-speaking countries. You will need to present as a master's student, PhD student, postdoc. You will go and present at conferences, and you will probably help your supervisor with teaching their classes as a teaching assistant. So you do need to communicate with students. So oral communication is extremely important. I was quite shy when I showed up in the US in 2004, and my English wasn't that great. And at some point, I joined Toastmasters International to improve my public speaking skills. And it was a great way to be forced to talk in front of people. And I had realized as a PhD student that that was something I was lacking. And I really enjoyed, I found really nice Toastmasters clubs in the areas where I lived, and I really enjoyed that time that I did that. I wish I still had time to do it. But that is the Toastmasters International. There are clubs all over the world. It's a great resource to improve your public speaking skills. Then in terms of written communication, writing is really important. Once you become a grad student, you really become a professional writer because all you do is write reports, and you need to publish and write manuscripts. And the easier the writing is for you, the better it is, because it's just part of your work. And when I was a PhD student and I worked on my first manuscripts, I went to the bookstore again and I was looking for resources, and I bought a scientific writing book. And I worked through that as I wrote my first manuscript. And I have since invested in a lot of scientific writing books, and there are lots out there these days, way more than in the early 2000s when I was a grad student. So that is something to look at, and I think invest into and work through those books. There are some great books out there that have exercises to work through, and that really help also improve the logical flow in the text that you write. So that is something that I think is really important for grad students and postdocs to work on. Again, do you need to have these skill sets when you apply? A master's student, probably not that much, but for PhD students, it is, I think, really important that you already come with decent scientific writing skills. So again, it's something I think you can work through on your own, and you to get help from your supervisor, but it is something to continuously work on as you move forward in your career, both the oral and written communication skills. And then attention to detail, again, sort of listed as a soft skill, or maybe I should have put this in my next section on the personality traits. I wasn't quite sure I listed it here. Attention to detail is hugely important for a biometrician or modeler. So whatever you do as a forest biometrician, when you explore your data, you need to be aware that there may be data entry errors or measurement errors. So you kind of need to keep an eye out for these kinds of things, and it requires a lot of attention to detail. And if you don't have that attention to detail, and you don't enjoy doing these kinds of things, maybe Forest Biometrics is not the right career for you, because I do think you have to be kind of picky in analyzing your data and paying that attention to detail. And same thing for as you present your results, as you present statistical results, you have to be paying attention to detail and make sure that you present the right things and that your code matches what you think you're doing. And so attention to detail is hugely important. And similarly, you do need, this links back to needing that background on how do trees grow, how do forest ecosystem functions, as you fit models, analyze data, do the model outputs, do your results make sense with regards to how an ecosystem functions. So to me, probably this is one of the most important skills to have as a forest biometrician. Can I actually check that students who apply to work with me have this trait? It's very difficult, I think, to check, but it's something to think about as you move forward, potentially in a forest biometrics career. Yeah, and then in terms of personality traits, I listed all these skill sets that I'm looking for, and I think I hope I made it clear that you don't need to have all of them when you apply for a graduate degree in forest biometrics, but that you need to be willing to work on some of those skill sets and acquire them. So it's, I think, important, as for any graduate student in any field, to take initiative and be self-driven. My supervisor, Temesgen, always said, Bianca, you're in the driver's seat. You drive where this is going. I'm here to support you. And I take the same stance with my grad students. So they're there. I can't make them do anything. They kind of need to want to move forward in their careers and invest into their graduate program, and I'm just there along for the ride to support them in a way where they need help and support. Right, and I did mention this repeatedly, there needs to be this willingness to put in effort to fill existing gaps. When I moved to the US with my master's degree to start my PhD program, I struggled a lot initially. I dropped out of stats courses from the stats department in the first term that I showed up because it was just also overwhelming. And then I registered again for those courses in the second year, and I had the support from Temesgen, which was wonderful. And I worked really hard, and I filled in the gaps in my math background to be able to succeed in the classes. So that is, I think, very important personality trait, to just not give up, but be willing to put in the effort and fill existing knowledge gaps. And then for my students, once I've recruited them, I think it's important that they want to finish their degrees and work towards the next steps in their career, and that they're honest about where they want to go. So for master's students, do you want to work in industry? Are you getting your master's degree with me to then apply for PhD programs? And this sort of, depending on where folks want to go, they may need to focus on different things during their degree program. And I can help with that, so sort of what to focus on, but students do need to be honest about their dreams with their supervisors, I think, so that they can get the best support and the best help. Similarly for PhD students, where do they want to be after their program? Do they want to work in industry? Do they want to work for an agency? Do they want to stay in academia? And how can I support them to make their dreams come true? And do they want to stay in Canada, or do students want to go back to their home country or a different country? And can I support them in making connections on where they want to go? And just a note here, plans change all the time, and that is okay. I think when I started my PhD at, that's my email. When I started my PhD program at OSU, I just wanted to get the PhD program and go back to Germany. And almost 20 years later, I'm still in North America. I did not want to work at a university, but that sort of changed throughout my PhD program and then my postdoc time. And here I am working at UBC as teaching Forest Biometrics courses. So don't think that you can't change your plans while you're in your degree program, but as you change your plans or change your dreams, change of where you want to go, I do think it's very important to reach out to folks who have what you want to have. And Joshua, I think, is a terrific example of he's reached out to lots of folks. People are typically willing to help you if you reach out and ask questions about what they do and how they got there. People are typically willing to help. So yeah, just have a plan of what you want to do, and that plan can change, but find some mentors to help you get to where you want to go. And your supervisor should be one of the folks who help you, but you can obviously reach out to other folks also. Yeah, so in summary, you will need some basic math, statistics, and programming skills. The more skills you have in these areas as you start, the easier it may be for you. As I said, you don't necessarily need to have them all as you apply for the programs. You just need to have some basic skills, the foundation that allows you to do well as you teach yourself or take courses to catch up on some of these skills. And just the statistics masters that I did, I struggled and it was hard, but it was one of the best things I had the opportunity to do. And I wouldn't be where I'm at if I hadn't gotten my master's in statistics. So that is something, as you do apply for PhD programs, are you able to dual enroll into Masters of Statistics? I think that is something to look into. I think a lot of forest biometricians have that sort of dual training in forest biometrics, a PhD and a master's in statistics, and I think it's very valuable. You do need basic forestry skills, as I mentioned, silviculture, measurements, modeling. They all link together, and you can't just, well, I guess you can, but you then have to maybe acquire those forestry ecology skill sets during your degree programs. If you work with forestry data, you kind of do need to learn a little bit about how trees grow and how forest ecosystems function. And then I strongly believe that oral and written communication skills are very, very important, and investing into them is hugely important. And as I said, you become a master's student, PhD student, postdoc, an academic. You're really a professional writer. Most of the time I spend on writing things, writing reports, writing papers, writing reference letters for students, writing proposals. My work is fully centered around writing. And so the more you invest into scientific writing skills, I think the more helpful that will be for your career moving forward. Even if you don't end up in academia, I think you will still need to write reports, etc., on your work. And if that is easy for you and doesn't painstakingly take a lot of time, it'll make your life easier. So investing into oral and written communication skills is never a bad thing. And then the attention to detail, and you kind of need to enjoy playing with data, I think, because otherwise it's probably a terrible job if you end up in forest biometrics and you have to work with data and programming and analyze data. So you should enjoy data analysis and playing with data, I think, if you go into the field of forest biometrics and modeling. And then really, I want to highlight, I listed a lot of skills here. I think many of them can be learned during your degree program, and it depends sort of what level you're at. Are you applying for a master's program or a PhD program? But you do need to be driven to fill your knowledge gaps and recognize where you have knowledge gaps, and then sort of find the resources and fill those knowledge gaps, like I did when I was a PhD student, working through the forest measurement textbooks and working through the calculus textbooks, and just being willing to invest time into learning things and acquiring skill sets yourself. I guess that's my big message. Well, it worked for me anyways, and I've seen for a lot of my grad students who were willing to go the extra mile and fill knowledge gaps and go beyond what's asked in coursework or for their research project, really succeed in what they're doing. And then I would really like, before I open this up for questions, acknowledge all the wonderful people who have helped me get to where I'm at, starting with my supervisor, master's thesis supervisor, Joachim Zabirowski from the University of Göttingen, who supported my application for my PhD at Oregon State University and really started me out on this trajectory. And then to my PhD supervisor, Tim Eskelson from Oregon State University, who's been very patient with me when I struggled in the beginning as PhD student, and is really I was so lucky to have Tim Eskelson as supervisor. And then I moved to UBC, and as Joshua mentioned, UBC has traditionally been known for forest biometrics due to my terrific colleagues, Val LeMay and Peter Marshall, and they've been wonderful mentors to me over the last many years. And thanks to all my collaborators in the U.S. Forest Service, USGS, BC Ministry of Forests, and Canadian Forest Service to support my projects and my grad students. I became involved with the Western Mensurationists when I was a grad student at OSU, and they've been wonderful people to hang out with at meetings and learn from. And similarly, IUFRO folks who have been there along the way and supported me. And last but not least, and probably the most important folks, are all my wonderful master's and PhD students and postdocs who keep me on my toes and are just wonderful to work with. And with that, thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bianca, for this really interesting topic. And yeah, I'm sure there are some potential applicants among us who will find it extremely useful to know where to focus their attention when applying. And so yeah, this is the beginning of the questions and answer session. There are already some questions in the chat box, which I will read now. First is from Anand, and it stands, I know it is important to keep yourself updated with the time and technology, and I feel that technology changes very quickly, and same it is with forest biometrics. I'm about to complete my PhD in environmental sciences and looking for postdocs overseas. I am seeing that everyone is asking that some coding language is required with other technical skills. What do you think if I have all other skills except coding, but I am willing to learn but little later? Will it make any sense for me?
Yeah, the coding is really important. And my guess is that if you don't have coding from your PhD program and you're applying for postdocs where they do need coding, it's going to be difficult for you. So this is really something that, how can I say this? I feel really lucky because I did my master's in Germany. And so they're not these research-based masters where you spend 2 years funded by the professor on a project, but it was more course-based and then 6 months for the master thesis. And there's not that publication pressure that is in North America, I think. So I had the opportunity to invest my 6 month that I was a master's student into programming. So I spent a lot of time trying things out in programming, and I had help from the PhD students in the department. And I think oftentimes a lot of the master's students in North America don't have that time to play around because the focus is so different. Their focus is on getting publishable units out of your degree, because that's what matters. And so that means you kind of have to invest into the programming on your own time in a way. Yeah, so I'm not sure I answered that question specifically, but the earlier you can invest into the programming, the better. When you apply for postdocs where they are looking for programming skills, they will most likely not consider, well, I shouldn't put words into other supervisors' mouth, but for me, when I have postdoc projects, they're often very time limited. And so they're 1 year projects, 2 year projects, maybe. So there's really not a lot of time to acquire skills. You kind of have to hit the ground running. So apply, right? You should always try. And I'm a big proponent, often I didn't talk about that lots, but as a PhD student, and even now, it's important, I think, to apply for things and try, and not say, oh, I'm not qualified, and not apply. So my recommendation is apply. If you do see programming skills are required lots, my suggestion is that you start investing into those programming skills if that is what's required for the jobs that you see that you're interested in.